Story time of how I made my high school bully's dad my sugar daddy. Freshman year wasn't the best time for me. I wasn't the most popular or best looking girl at school. I was really shy, and instead of trying to make friends and talk to people, I kept to myself. Most people let me do my own thing, but then there was a girl named Claire. I don't know what I ever did to this girl, but she made my life miserable every chance she got. Making fun of my looks and putting me down in front of others was almost a daily ritual for Claire. My mom didn't have a lot of money, so I couldn't afford the cool clothing brands and styles that we're in. Claire would call me out for being poor and say I got all my clothes from Goodwill, all while laughing. One day at lunch, she smacked the tray out of my hands as I was passing by, and food got all over me. This resulted in the whole cafeteria staring and laughing at me. Fast forward to the end of senior year, and I had a major glow up. I was more confident, people started noticing me, and I had a lot of friends. I figured it was time to start dating, but I didn't really like anyone at school, so I downloaded a dating app. I matched with a handsome older guy who was looking for a sugar baby. I looked him up on Instagram to see more pictures and saw Claire in one of his photos. Upon further inspection, I discovered that this man was her recently divorced dad. I immediately messaged him.
Time. Okay, so this story is about one of the biggest scandals at my middle school. So there was this kid at my school. We'll go ahead and we'll call him Jonah. So Jonah didn't really have any friends, but I noticed that Jonah either always had a girl with him or girls. So then the middle school that both me and Jonah went to has an elementary school literally right next to it. And my little brothers went to that elementary school next door. So every day after I got out of school, I would go and I would pick my brothers up. Now, when I would pick them up, I would always see that Jonah was always in the main office, always sitting next to the secretary. But no one ever really thought much of it because everyone was almost sure that they were like somehow related, or that maybe she was just his ride home from school or something. And just so you guys know, at the time both me and Jonah were in the same grade, which was 8th grade. So then this one
Chelsea is back. She spilled more tea, of course, so stay till the end to hear all the gossip. As for the nails, if you remember from her last appointment, we did a gel-X set on her, and I decided to not soak them off and do a fill with the same set. It's completely fine to do this. I personally prefer to not soak off. I filed and blended the remainder of the tip into her natural nail, and then just did my basic cuticle prep as usual. I strengthened the remainder of the extension with a hard gel, and then went in with a color and design. So for the tea, Chelsea's hubby's ex-wife saw on Facebook through a mutual friend's profile that Chelsea's pregnant. Mind you, his ex always wanted kids, and he always came up with some kind of excuse. She frantically starts calling him and shows up at his house like for part 2.
Worst client story time. I was only doing nails for about 2 weeks, but she knew I was a beginner. She told me she was proud of me, so this lady booked a short white square full set. She was about 10 minutes late, $10 late fee. After I was done, she paid me $60. She paid $40 for her nails, $10 late fee, and tipped me $10, my first ever tip. She told me she loved her nails and left my studio. A week later, she messages me telling me she hates her nails and that I need to refund her or she's going to go public, so I said, go ahead. She then posts my full name, Instagram, number, and address on all of her social media platforms explaining that I can't do nails. So obviously I told my older sister, and she decided to put her on blast on live.
Story time! Okay guys, I'm not the type to get sick at all. I get sick like once or twice a year. But because I don't get sick, that one time that I do get sick, it's really bad. So this situation happened when I was 13 and it was February. And because you guys don't know this either, for some reason, ever since I was 10 years old, something bad always happens to me the first 3 weeks of February. So like I said, I was 13 when this happened. I was sick, and I remember I got up one morning, got ready for school, and my mom took me. When we got to the school, my mom was like, are you sure you want to go? And I was like, no, to be honest, I really don't want to go to school. So she was just like, okay, well, let me go talk to the front lady because they already called me saying that they were going to send you to court if you miss school again. We went inside and my mom was talking to the front lady, and she obviously seen that I was sick. So she told my mom, she was like, okay, I'll let Stephanie miss one more day, but after that she can't anymore because she's going to get sent to court. And my mom was like, okay, thank you, I'll make sure she doesn't miss school anymore. After that, we left the school and my mom had a few things to do, so she was like, you're just going to come with me. So our first stop was this healthcare place. We walked into the building and there was a lot of people there, so we got into the line. And as I'm standing there, I got really hot. It literally felt like someone put me in an oven, and then my head started hurting. And then about 3 seconds after that happened, I noticed that I was bleeding from the left side of my nose. So I told my mom I'll be right back. So I told my friend to close her eyes because I could tell she was really scared. And I told her I would look instead. So then at this point, it was 2 in the morning and I see the figure standing in the room. I start yelling at it for it to leave, so I pulled out my phone and I started recording, and that's when I seen the figure run away. And let me tell you guys, it ran away really fast. We stayed in the room and morning finally comes in, and I decided to tell my friend that we should pretend to be sick. I ended up texting my mom everything that had happened that night. She texted me back and she was like, I'm coming to pick you up right now. So then after that, we ended up going up to my friend's mom and I showed her the entire footage. And after I showed her the video, she called the cops cops immediately. So then at that point, me and my friend are really confused and we're just sitting there waiting for the police to show up. But my mom ended up showing up before the police could. And when she showed up, she just grabbed my arm and she's like, it's time to leave. I don't want you staying at this house anymore. And then literally as we're leaving, the cops ended up showing up to my friend's house. That's when I seen my friend's mom show the cops the video. And they ended up arresting my friend's dad literally right after that. So then supposedly the mom had seen this figure go into her daughter's room every single night, but she was very close to like spiritual things. So she just always figured that it was something spiritual coming in to check on her daughter, but she would always...
So when I was a sophomore in high school, I had this teacher who would only let the students in her class use the restroom one time per semester. Well, one day I raised my hand and I was like, excuse me, I don't remember her name, can I please use the restroom? And she was like, no, you can't because you've already used the restroom in my class this semester. Well, excuse me, you can't dictate my bladder. So I'm like all frustrated and I started secretly texting my mom because I wasn't allowed to use my phone in class. And I was like, Mom, I'm sitting in class right now. My teacher won't let me use the restroom. And she was like, I'll take care of it for you. And I was like, okay. So like 5 minutes goes by and all of a sudden my teacher's phone starts ringing and she walks up to it and answers it and she's like, hello? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then she walks up to me like so angry and she like slams the pass on my desk and she was like, since you have to go that bad. And I was like, yeah, I really do. Thanks. And I got up and left. I didn't even have to go to the bathroom. It was just the principle of it. I just roamed the halls.
Story time. So in 7th grade, I had this teacher that everyone absolutely hated. She was an older white lady around her mid-60s, and she was the worst teacher I've ever had. Literally from day one, she was just overall not a good teacher. Anytime someone would ask her for help, she wouldn't help us, and she would get mad whenever people couldn't find the answers. Whenever we couldn't find the answers, she would always say the same things. She would say things like, it should be in the books, or really you guys can't find it yourselves. And she never actually taught anything either. She would just hand us work on topics that we knew nothing about. So of course, students would talk back to her often, but it was always after she disrespected the students first. And then after, she would start crying in the classroom and she would say that nobody had any respect for her. And then she would go on to say that she was old and that she couldn't handle this anymore. And apparently we were also really mean, but so was she. So eventually everyone in the classroom agreed that we weren't going to let this teacher disrespect us anymore without telling her something back. Just kind of figured that just because you're old doesn't mean you automatically gain our respect. So if she disrespected any of us, we would stand up for ourselves. So this one day in class, story time. So about a year ago, I had a boyfriend. We'll call him Jacob. Me and him had been dating for about half a year, and one day when me and him were on the phone, he tells me that he's thinking about bringing a gun to school. I told him not to do it and that it was a stupid idea, and he says, okay. I thought that was the end of it and didn't think about it much after that. About a week later, I'm in school, and he texted me in the middle of history, which was the second to last class of the day. He asked me to meet him, so I go to his locker and he pulls out a pistol. He asked me if I could take it so he doesn't get in trouble, and I said no, and that I told him not to bring it. He got mad and said, well, I hope you know I'm probably gonna get suspended. I was angry but didn't say anything. I walked away and went back to class, not planning on saying anything because I knew he wouldn't use it. I was in my last class of the day when I asked to go to the bathroom. When I got back, my friend walks up to me and tells me that the police had came in looking for me. My heart dropped. I knew immediately that that meant that he had gotten caught. I sat through the rest of my class, and when it was over, I tried to get out of the school as fast as I could. I passed the lobby, and another friend of mine walked up to me and told me that in the middle of class, Jacob had gotten arrested. I wasn't surprised, and when I told my mom about it, we called Jacob's mom. Hardly even 30 seconds into the call, she hangs up saying that her dad, Jacob's grandpa, had called her and told her that Jacob hadn't gotten off the bus at home. She called us back and told us, and I told her everything that happened, and she called the school. They didn't even call her. They told her that it was because they couldn't call until they were done questioning. Apparently, she drove to the school and caused a scene. He was only suspended for about 10 days, but the second me and Jacob spoke, I told him that I thought it was best we break up or at least take a break. We broke up and I haven't spoke to him since.
Story time. Someone tried to murder me on a school trip. So during my senior year, I started talking to this guy that we can call Tyler. And we all had to go on a school trip for a competition. During this, we had to stay in a hotel room and we were all assigned partners. Well, I didn't know this at the time, but I was actually assigned Tyler's ex-girlfriend. We can call her Penny. And when I found out she was his ex, I was like, you know what? Not a big deal. I'm probably just overthinking it, but she had a reputation for being psychotic. And I mean psychotic. Since we were all in close quarters, it didn't take her long to figure out that I was talking to her ex, and she went crazy on me. She basically threatened me by saying that if she ever saw me with him again, I wouldn't be coming home to my family. I still honestly didn't take her that seriously until the next day she saw us kissing, and she left the hotel room to buy throwing knives for when I got back. So when I reached the hotel room that day, she was yelling at me, threatening me, and then she took out one of the knives. Stay tuned for part 2 and follow me on Insta.
Story time! Okay, so this story is about how my first and last ever homecoming was ruined by a jock. So this guy, we'll call him James, and I began talking a few weeks before homecoming, right? And I really thought he was going to ask me to the homecoming dance, but he didn't. So James was a football player, so he was really busy after school most days, which I didn't blame him for, of course. And about the second or third day before the dance, James asked me for a date set for the day after homecoming. Of course, I said yes, but I was also really disappointed because I was going to the dance without a date. I really wanted to go, so my parents told me that I needed to tell him what I wanted to do so he wouldn't get the idea that I was always going to do what he wanted. Now, I was afraid to tell him what I wanted for the fear of sounding greedy and ungrateful. And long story short, he ended up asking me to the dance eventually. So then the night of the dance, there's a football game, and after the game ends, he goes home to shower. 45 minutes after the dance starts, he shows up and sits there on his phone the entire time. Mind you, even though he showered, he smelled really bad. But while he was on his phone, obviously I was mad because I wanted to have fun, not just sit there for 2 hours. Anyways, I was a little sneaky and I was looking over at his phone in the meantime while I tried to figure out something to talk about. And that's when I saw this man deleting text messages and call logs between him and people that I didn't know.
In high school, I was friends with this girl named Sarah. One day, she caught me trying to steal $50 from her during our group project. She requested the teacher not to work with me. I got very mad because she could have just talked it out. Back then, I was an angry and volatile person. So what follows is, well, nothing I'm too proud of. I ended up spreading rumors about her that she had Marfan syndrome, which isn't true, and that she's a racist Trump supporter. After I did this, no one wanted to be her friend. We went to a small high school. She literally had no one. I even turned her best friend against her and made up a bunch of stuff that she never even said. I tried to make her everyday life as difficult as possible. In the end, I put a photo of her Photoshop with her abuser in the yearbook who doesn't attend our high school. From what I heard, she cried and cried when she saw it. She knows I did it because I signed my name at the bottom. I also made a bunch of Tumblr posts talking trash about her and she saw all of them. Shortly after this, she went rogue.
Story time! So this situation happened when me and my friend group had just started 7th grade. And one of my friends in the group had already gotten detention for not finishing her homework. And keep in mind that this was a very strict teacher, so no one liked him. We'll call him Mr. Brown. So when the class found out that Mr. Brown gave Sophie detention for not finishing her homework, everyone thought that it was really unfair. A couple weeks go by and Sophie hated the teacher. And I'm pretty sure he hated all of us too. So then this one day, me, Sophie, and the rest of the group decided that we were tired of going to Mr. Brown's class just to get yelled at, so we decided that we were going to skip his class for that day. At the end of the period, we were walking to our next classes when we ran into Mr. Brown. He called us and pulled us aside, and he asked us where we were and why we weren't in his class today. We told him that we had all gone to the office, but he didn't believe us, so he gave all of us detention except for Sophie. In front of all of us, he told her to meet up with him after school and that she was going to spend detention in his class while we had it in a different class across the school.